Welcome, everyone, once again to another fantastic, very official holiday version of Trotec Laser Live. We're so happy to have you with us. If this is your first time joining, I'm joined by my good pal, Laser Dave. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you doing, Don? It's a pleasure to be here again.
Me as well. Me as well. I am a little bit under the weather. I will apologize in advance for my voice, but hopefully it won't stop us from getting across any fantastic Ruby information. Wherever you're watching from, I hope you'll say hello in the chat. We've got some members of our R&D team joining us today, including one of our UI designers for Ruby specifically in the chat. So if you have any questions as relates to the future of Ruby or as relates to the UI design of Ruby in particular, I hope you'll drop them in the chat and we'd be happy to try and grab those. Any questions about Dave and my Christmas plans, of course, feel free to drop those in the chat.
I got the proper hat on here, so Christmas is definitely a Christmas Ruby special.
We regretted having missed the boat on Halloween so badly that we knew that this month we definitely weren't going to drop the ball. But we're so grateful to have everyone joining us. And if you're watching later on YouTube, the same to you. Very happy holiday season, either now or in the future. So very much like last month, we would love for this to be an interactive session. Dave and I have a few things we'd like to talk to you about with our most recent Ruby release. But by and large, we really love to get questions from you guys in the chat. So if there's anything Trotec related, specifically Ruby related or not, that you'd like to toss in the chat and ask Dave, myself, or any of the team who are joining us in the back end, we'd be very happy to talk to you about that. As we get started, though, Dave, you recently had a very exciting new arrival to your laser lab that I would love to hear a little bit more about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just recently got the brand new version of the Speedy 300 and 100 models. New version that actually has the built-in camera registration, the overhead camera, VDP, Vision Design and Position Camera System overhead. So now on our Speedy 100 systems, I will actually have it live right now, so I can now look through the little video and you can see the actual screen and we can calibrate to a specific location. So new features, new additions adding to our line. In the past, those two models didn't have the camera system. Now the Speedy 100, 300, 360, and 400 all now have the VDP camera system. So exciting stuff.
Very exciting stuff. This is a piece of feedback that we got quite a bit, I'd say, over the last year or two regarding, the 100 and 300 owners feeling a little bit left out in the cold as pertains to kind of the camera specifically. So we really wanted to be sure to let you guys know that this is something that we'd heard. This is feedback that we brought back. And, we're very happy to be able to bring that to you. So nice hats, gentlemen. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Getting some nice feedback on the Santa hats in the chat. I will say, when it comes to features of the VDP camera, what are the things that you're most often quoting to customers, Dave? Or what are the things you're most often hearing from customers that, you feel like the VDP camera is a good response to? How can it be most helpful when you're, processing applications?
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things when, in the earlier days of cameras, it was kind of like, oh, it's kind of a novelty. It's kind of cool. And then I really kind of got to use it. I'm like, well, this is very efficient. It's very convenient. Especially when it comes to running one-up type stuff, prototyping stuff, testing stuff. Residual materials, that's the one that got me is, when you got that sheet of acrylic that you don't have much left and you need to just get that little spot in there, and I'm dialing it in with the red pointer, trying to rotate it so that it fits just in that spot that I have left because I don't have any material left. The VDP camera eliminates that. You literally have a calibrated view. And that's the difference. It's calibrated. So we actually run a calibration mode on it so that when you position something on that field, it actually puts it in the right spot. And and so that when you're positioning, and now it's not as accurate as like really dialing in with the red dot pointer. It does skew a little bit into the far corners. But for prototyping, confirming something, testing something, using residual materials, it's an efficiency improving tool. And so, yes, your laser's not any faster with or without it, but when you're doing those prototyping jobs and you need to actually position something or get that residual material, it does really improve the efficiency and allow you to get those products out quicker, faster, and easier, and kind of fits in with the whole speedy line because it speeds the process up.
I think the big one for me, like you said, was the residual material. I have so many pieces of material that I've used for samples that are just cut to pieces, and I have that last little sliver in the corner that I want to be able to use.
Material's expensive, so definitely helpful there.
Absolutely. Not to mention too that prototyping, I think, was a good one you mentioned, where those last little slivers of material, that's exactly what I use it for, right? Well, I know it's not big enough to use for any meaningful, customer job, let's say, but realistically, if I have it and I can use it for a little bit of testing that I'm doing for a customer, whatever it might be, then, all the better. The other one, and you mentioned it quickly, but one-offs. So for me, although I have tremendous faith in the precision of the red dot pointer, when I have customers calling me for information or advice on how to engrave somebody's one-of-one pocket watch that they're,
sure,
great grandfather brought, being able to see that information just gives me so much peace of mind. When see that ahead.
I don't know. I think I have 30,000 hours, and on the laser, and I would still go. Are you sure? I even with my confidence, it's like those one-up heirloom type things that you're like, ugh. Yeah,
scary stuff.
High risk.
Scary stuff. Always. And I mean, realistically, that's not something that you and I necessarily have to worry about so much. That's where our customers have to, be a little bit more mindful. And I'm always so impressed by the courage and the talent that our customers have for this stuff. But I will say the VDP camera can be a great asset, kind of regardless of what sort of stuff you're doing, even if it's not, one-of-one heirloom pieces from your, great grandmother's estate or whatever it might be. Got a couple questions starting to come in here in the chat. I will grab a quick one here from, I believe it is Michaela, but I hope you'll forgive me if I am mispronouncing that. As a first step, Michaela is asking if you can engrave on metal with a Trotec laser. Do you want to kind of give her the rundown of the two sources, Dave, or how you?
Yeah, that's just funny. It's and that is probably one of the most tricky question when it comes to a laser. Can I engrave and or cut metal? And so we get that all the time, and the answer is yes, kind of, sort of, maybe. It's one of those materials that there are ways around it. It depends on what wavelength you want. With a Trotec laser, is pretty vague because we make lasers that are fiber lasers. And with a fiber laser, yes, the answer is absolutely yes. We can engrave and mark onto the surface of metals, all types of metals, any kind of metal, period, end of story. Now, with a CO2 laser, this becomes more complex. We can remove coatings off of metals, painted, powder coating, anodization, no problem. But when it comes to marking directly into the surface of raw metal, meaning the just polished surface metal, the answer is no. We cannot mark it directly. However, there are alternatives to marking or fusing onto the surface of that metal. I have a video called that kind of shows the both, the difference between marking directly with a fiber laser and then using the metal marking compounds. There's a lot of different brands of these metal marking compounds, but in essence, they're a molybdenum trioxide glass fibered material, or ceramic, if you will, that is sprayed on, looks like a clay compound. The laser hits it. It actually melts this compound into glass, black glass, and fuses it into the surface of the metal, kind of like a welder would apply, a compound onto the surface. So it's a surface fused mark, giving you a durable, permanent mark onto the metal. A few drawbacks of this: it is a surface mark. It does require the metal being raw. It can't be clear coated or hit with a lacquer or polyurethane first. And so the raw metal has to be raw. It is faster than a fiber laser. It's very durable. It's UV stable. It's a very good alternative for marking onto metals. And so I do have a video that you can go on, type in the metal comparison, deep dive. I think it's a deep dive with Laser Day video that showcases both combinations, the difference between the time difference between the both wavelengths, the CO2 with the metal marking compound and the fiber laser running direct.
I believe, so I was just searching our web store here, and I believe the one that you'll find most readily on our shop.troteclaser.com web store is the Cermark, CERMARK.
Yeah.
But Dave's exactly right that there are multiple different compounds, and they all kind of work in a very similar fashion. I think you make a good point, though, to bring up the fact that you can, with a fiber laser, you can really mark pretty much any kind of metal, whether it be titanium, aluminum, steel, regardless. Do the feedback that I most often hear when it comes to fiber lasers is going to be, what is the difference between engraving and marking? Because I would argue that, when you come to a flex machine, by and large, a lot of what you're seeing is going to be more of what I would call a mark, like a surface level, without depth. Whereas if you're looking for depth in a metal engraving, you're by and large going to be looking more towards a fiber only, like Speedmark style machine. Is that a fair generalization?
Yeah, and that gets a lot of people. They're like, what's the difference between mark and engrave? And the simple answer is depth. If you can get a depth, it's considered an engraved. You can physically feel that depth. Most fiber lasers will mark the surface of the metal, but yes, there's a minute amount of depth, but there's no discernible depth. You can't really feel it. So that is the difference. A galvo fiber laser is required to mark depth into metal. A flatbed fiber laser will not, because it can't change the engraving angle and direction. Requires multiple angles and direction to mark depth into metal. And so that is the difference. So if you hear a laser mark, and it may be laser marked plastic like acrylic or something like that, and you can also laser engrave acrylic. The difference is a mark is just a frosted surface, and then engraving is a subsurface engraving where you can physically feel it or color feel it, where you have that discernible depth.
Yes. And I think John makes a very good point here from the chat that I wanted to call attention to. We love Surmark. We love it all the time, but he's exactly right. You have to account in terms of your production scale. You have to account for the added work, the pre-production and post-production work that Surmark or a similar compound creates.
You got to spray it on. It does that takes minutes to dry. Then you have to engrave it. Then you have to wash it off. But it is cheaper, and it's actually faster than a fiber laser. Fiber laser takes about 2 to 3 times more time to mark on stainless steel, but there's no pre and post prep, and it's more durable. So use your judgment. If you don't do it very often, it's a great option, but if you do it all the time, fiber laser may be a better solution.
Yes. And the one other little caveat that I will mention for anybody considering a fiber versus, particularly, I was talking to a customer recently who, like John, was using Surmark and said, you know what, we'd like to go over to a fiber laser. We'd like to get this kind of black mark, but without having to do all the extra work with the Surmark. And I said, okay, but keep in mind that a fiber laser is engraving a piece of material in the same way that a CO2 does. So the reason on a piece of lamequite, for example, you get that second color is it's because it's the color of the substrate that's underneath. Not every metal is going to come up dark black or really easily legible. Yeah. Exactly. I have many pieces of aluminum that I've marked that by and large, the default marking I would say for aluminum comes out like a white or a gray, right?
Yeah.
So if you're used to that Surmark black mark, just make sure to maybe ask your local Trotec, let's do a couple of tests on your piece of metal to see what the resulting mark that we get out is, so you're not kind of waiting on a particular mark that you're used to and then kind of getting, a mixed reaction.
Yeah. Another method to get a mark of black just quickly is if the metal is clear coated first, like aluminum or brass, you can use an oxidizer. So the fiber laser etches away the clear coat, which a CO2 will not do. And then you just wipe some oxidizer in it. You got a jet black mark within seconds. So that's another way to do that.
I wanted to pull up this question here from Wendy because I thought this was one that maybe we had addressed in a recent update, but I'm curious. So she says when she's engraving a tumbler, it rotates and engraves the top half first, then rotates all the way back around. And this is one that used to get me too, Wendy. So Dave, please.
Yeah, this is, unfortunately, there was an actual software glitch or change that fixed this problem. So, but it was a little more complex than that. It wasn't something, if you update your Ruby software, it's still good to go, but you need to upgrade your firmware on your laser machine with the rotary plugged in. And then once you update it to the newer version of the firmware, that problem will go away and has been resolved. And so go to mytrotec.com. We'll reach out to one of our service techs and have them walk you through. The machine has to be on, the rotary has to be plugged in. In essence, the software inside the rotary needs to be updated and it'll resolve that problem.
Yes, perfect. Another quick question here from Michaela. And I thought this is one that maybe we can show here in Ruby, although I believe because of the age of your SP500, you might still be using job control, but I would love to encourage you. Never been a better time to switch up to Ruby.
Sure.
About how to make the laser head go back home if the home button on the machine itself no longer works, and then essential maintenance tasks to ensure optimal performance. And this is a subject that I would love to cover off almost every month when we do these, because there is no amount of talking about maintenance that is too much. So in Ruby, in terms of setting your custom home position or setting a home position, do you want to kind of really quickly show us the?
Yeah, for sure. Within Ruby, it's pretty easy to do that. Just go to your drop-down menu in the upper left-hand corner, go down to settings, and then we can identify it kind of within the system itself, a couple of the user preferences, the device settings, and stuff like that. And within these, we can indicate the home position right here. So in the home position, what do you want to do at the end of the job? In the drop-down menu, I can customize it and have it go to a specific location. I can have it go to the start position, or I can have it go back to 0, 0, or none. And so it just stops where it finished. You get to choose what you want. If I want it to go to 0, 0, or the start position at where it started each time, hit the save button here, and it's going to keep that way for you. Makes it very easy to identify what happens to that focus head when that job finishes. Sometimes you're doing the same job in the same location. I want it to go to that start position or wherever I started from. And so it's going to go back to wherever that started from.
Sure.
I personally like the 0 position, hitting save there to get that done. This way the head goes back to that upper left-hand corner, gets out of your way, and allows you to reload the machine and move forward towards the next job.
One where I've really, so I'm with you. I really like it going back to the 0, 0 position personally, but one where I always have to remind myself, and because we recently talked about the question from Wendy, is with mugs. With mugs, I'm always really careful about where it goes back to as a starting position, because if I've got that handle potentially on a mug that's turning around, if I don't have my 2.5-inch lens there to easily clear my handle, sometimes I really want to be sure that it's stopping wherever it's
handles
stopping.
Handles can be tricky for sure. I always make sure when I do handles to start where the handle's upright, and then change the engraving direction so it goes all the way back around, so that handle can never kind of hit that no chance of ever hitting that lens. And this allows me like a 270-degree possible wrap, or 280-degree, just not that last handle section, so that head won't hit it. That is a tricky one. Definitely takes some little trial and error with handles for sure. But making sure you have the head moving to the right location so it doesn't bang into that and cause damage or ruin your product is key.
And to be honest, after some trial and error, I was able to get it. And if I'm able to get it, I have tremendous confidence that everybody in our chat will be able to get it. I have no concern there. So a little quick question here from DNS, who asks about the latest update for Ruby. In the release notes, there was nothing there. So this is something that is going to be corrected. The most recent patch notes, there was just a content freeze on the website. So they are still coming. I know that they are still going to be releasing those in kind of a later point, but not to worry. This is just something that is a temporary situation that will be corrected by itself, I believe. Question for you here, Dave, from Ross, who was asking about optimum settings for engraving crystal. So now, when we say optimum settings, it's very, very difficult. We don't want to put Dave on the spot here, because realistically, optimum is going to depend on what laser you have, how much power you have, what type of crystal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you had any kind of tips or tricks for going about trying to engrave glass or crystal, I think that would be a great kind of starting point.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, shout out to Dan. Hey, Dan, on the previous one. Nice to see you. But yes, to answer your questions on crystal, crystal is one of those materials that's got a lot of misconception in the industry, because it is different than glass. It is not the same as glass, but it reacts very similar to glass. There's also misconception out there that you can't engrave crystal because it's going to crack. And this is kind of true only when you engrave very large areas. When engraving crystal, it's very similar to glass in the fact that it works very similar. Try to stay away from very large engravings, because what will happen is it can build up heat with large engravings. And as it's starting to cool, it kind of absorbs that heat and it can cause cracks. I've never actually had it happen. The amount of lead content, whether it's titanium crystal, whether it's leaded crystal, can make a difference as well. On how well and the quality of it can make a difference, the size of the graphic. When etching it, I use all my glass hacks, basically. The using grayscale for shades of grayscale kind of brings it apart. You can type in the Laser Dave on glass, and I got a whole bunch of glass hacks. Power settings are going to highly depend on what machine you're using, what wattage. If you're using say a traditional speedy 300, 360, 80 watt machine, 100% power, around 50, 60% speed, between 500 and 1,000 DPI. Sometimes I will run 1,000 DPI on crystal, not glass, but crystal, because it can actually handle some of that, especially the titanium leaded or the titanium crystals. It works really well. I'm able to achieve far more greater detail, sharper, crisp edges. It can handle the black engravings a little better. And you almost get a teeny bit of depth into it. So I like the titanium crystal better than the old leaded crystal. Also, leaded crystal, when you're burning it with the laser, you are potentially exposing yourself to lead toxins. So I try to stay away from the old leaded crystals just for the biohazards that could happen from it. But the process is ultimately the same. You know, hit it a lot like glass. do a little bit of trial and error on it. If you are getting fragmentation and chipping and flaking, run a grayscale. So 60, 70, 80% grayscale. It breaks apart your pulse pattern. The laser fires not as often and keeps that chipping and flaking from happening. So definitely look at some of my glass laser hacks on some of that case, but the halftone effect works, or the diffusion dither or dither pattern that you're going to get by running it as a grayscale dramatically improves that, and also allows for a wipe in color fill. Lots of different techniques for doing that stuff. So I could go down an entire seminar just on glass and crystal alone.
Definitely. And I was going to ask you, I mean, in terms of, you were talking about typical glass hacks. I mean, you guys should absolutely go watch Laser Dave's laser hacks. I revisit them constantly. I don't mind telling you, even though he's here in the group with me. But I would say that they are full of great stuff. One of my favorites being the moist paper towel underneath thick acrylic. That saved me so many times from flare-ups and flaming. When you're looking at, so one of the questions I often get about glass, as long as we're talking about it, is how much difference will you really see in engraving result based on the type of glass? Because I've had people tell me things like, oh, borosilicate glass is, you know, you're going to get XYZ result, or this particular type of glass is more difficult than that type of glass, or, you know, what it might be. Any sort of general tips in terms of, you know, going into glass engraving, apart from maybe masking or things like that?
Yeah, and again, it is very specific. The problem is there's so many manufacturers and brands and types of glass. And you're right, borosilicate is a better, much higher quality. That's the kind of glass that you would see on your phone screen, you know, Pyrex type stuff. You're going to get a real sharp, crisp mark onto it. It is designed to handle it as shock proof. If you ever take like an old Pyrex pan and engrave it, you're like, this isn't glass. It doesn't perform anything like that. Now, the most common, inexpensive stuff that you're going to see everywhere is just called soda lime glass. This is the stuff you're going to get at the dollar store when you're buying a set of glasses. It is all over the place. Your consistency, quality, durability, imperfections are going to be all over the place. You're going to have a percentage of failure rate. If you buy a dozen glasses from, you know, a restaurant supply house and want to engrave the restaurant logo onto all of them, probably run into the risk of 10 to 20% of them are going to fail, simply because the glass is inconsistent. The diameters tend to vary from one piece to the next because their molds aren't consistent. The one thing I find with glass, it is the worst material on the planet, in my opinion, when it comes to focal tolerance, which means if you deviate and that material or diameter changes just a teeny bit, you're going to go from a really good engraving to chipping and flaking and residue. When you run your fingers across, it's just going to flake off. So you really need to make sure it's consistent. You know, if you're doing 10 drink glasses, I literally need to refocus every single one, because you're going to find that almost every single one's diameter is going to be off just enough. If it was wood or plastic or something, wouldn't be a problem. But on glass, if it's off just at all, you're going to start to have problems. And so, yes, it will take more time to maybe refocus. Sometimes I'll even measure them all and then put them in little piles and say, okay, these are all close enough to run as one focus. And then when I do another pile, I refocus that pile. But I literally have to measure every single glass before I run it. Even on flat glass, because it's not flowed properly when it's melted down to its diameter or height, you'll say one side is thicker than the other. And that small amount of deviation, which wouldn't affect, you know, acrylics and woods and other materials, will be affected on glass. It is so finicky when it comes to you know, being in and out of focus. And if your focus calibration is off, and this is why we run into so many problems with that material.
Right. Okay. I'm really glad I asked. So are you using it, because so when you talk about faults, you're talking about things like the engraving not coming out clearly, the engraving not coming out at all, like you said, chipping, flaking, that kind of thing, I presume.
It's also imperfections in the glass manufacturing process. They don't heat it properly. Their formula is a little different. There's microfractures that you can't visually see, and the cheaper the glass is going to give you more problems. There's a misconception in the industry. You buy the cheap stuff, it works better. Yes, that's the true fact in sand carving and sandblasting, but not on laser. Higher quality is going to produce better engraving quality.
Okay. Is there a particular lens you'd recommend if we've got less tolerance for focal difference? Then I imagine, I mean, are we going, you know, further afield? Are we going closer in? What's our
No, your standard lens is the best lens, the 2-inch. If you want more detail, the 1.5, but now you run into more risk of deviational focus. Higher detail, 2.5, your beam is now wide enough to where you start to see fragmentation and problems more often. So the 2-inch lens gives me the least amount of failure rate. Again, it's not zero by any means, but it is by far the most consistent out of every lens that I've used. So longer lenses do not help you because the wider beam or the further away distance creates a larger beam diameter. A 2-inch lens gives us approximately a 5,000th of an inch beam diameter. And if you go to a 2.5, it's further away, giving us more tolerance, but now our spot size is 7,000ths of an inch. And that little bit of difference in diameter creates more heat buildup in the material because it's got less what we call power density, less energy in that spot. And that energy is released into the material, causing more fragmentation and fracturing.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Wow, fantastic. Is there any other material that kind of has that similar level of like, you have to be really, really particular about it? Because I'm trying to think.
Not really.
Most materials, like Dave makes a good point earlier on when he's talking about the questions we get a lot. And I would argue that, like, can you engrave on metal is probably number one.
Yeah, for sure.
From existing customers, how do you engrave on glass is probably in the top 3 somewhere, right? And I'm trying to think if there's any other material that's even close, but I don't know that there is, apart from maybe rotaries. But rotary, I think, is pretty self-explanatory once you've kind of gotten your head around, the slight difference in how you're going to program, one to the next. But wow, okay, that's really interesting. Gotcha. And then, so in terms of them, when you're looking at crystal versus glass, same procedures apply, same kind of same concerns. Okay, gotcha.
The only limitation is that on glass, I can get away with like an entire solid Miro engraved onto it. Where if it was a sheet of crystal, you run a high risk of that actually causing cracks. It absorbs more heat and retains that heat. And the more engraving you do, the more heat. And then as it cools, it could cause a thermal shock, and so they could cause it to crack. Now, there will way around it if you were to heat it up and keep it on, say, a hot plate while you're engraving it, and then slowly cool it down at a controlled rate. Then you could control that, but most are not going to go to that level.
Well, so let me ask you this then: in terms of controlling the amount of heat, the amount of engraving that you're doing, a mistake that I've made in the past, and I'm not ashamed to say it, is that if I'm doing something that's very, very thin, particularly thin Lamicoid type material, if I'm generating too much heat in a particular area, obviously the material will start to warp or deform, or it can start to bubble up, that sort of thing. Is it true, or is it an urban legend that if I were to do a little bit of engraving, say in this top corner, and then come over to the bottom right corner and do a little engraving over here, and then come back over here, and if I separate out my engraving, is that going to help?
That's a great way to do it. I do it all the time when I'm cutting thin acrylic, and you get them kind of warping. If there's a thin webbing, I'll skip every other one by using different colors. So you can cut over here and then cut over here. And in the meantime, it cools enough to where it doesn't distort. Where if you were to cut them all right next to each other, the acrylic starts to warp and distort because it's building up that heat. So separating it by color is a method to do that. Now, if you have to do a continuous graphic, say a big photo or graphic, that may not be possible. So, but you're right. If it does have lots of black and white, it's a vectorized graphic, and I can change the color. Then I can assign those different colors. Even if they're the same power and speed setting, it'll do one color, and then it'll do the next color in that different location. And you can do up to 16 different colors, all at the same power and speed. But what you're doing is saying, hey, run this area, now run the area down in the complete opposite area, and then go back to that area, giving it enough time to cool in this case.
So speaking of doing cuts using a larger vector graphic, I wondered if you might quickly show us. So there was a little tiny feature, just to kind of touch off on it really fast. It's one that you and I talk a little bit about because we're dweebs, but the contouring feature. They've made a slight change in the most recent feature to the contouring feature that you and I both think is pretty cool. I wondered if you might just quickly show it.
Yeah, we were just talking about that, and it was using this turtle image. Shut the camera off, so and better.
To really quickly, he just shut the camera off, but I want to specify, if you weren't here in the beginning, this is running from Dave's brand new Speedy 100, I believe, right, Dave?
Correct. Yeah, it's the 100 I have in my home office here. So it's a smaller machine, so I can run it, but I can actually just turn my camera on and have access to my design, my material within the graphic itself. And as you can see by the field size, it's a 12 by 24 field with a camera registration, or not camera registration, I'm sorry, a VDP overhead camera system.
So sorry, returning to the contours. I apologize.
Yeah. So in the past, we've always been able to take like a contour, and this is a great feature. So if you were to cut something out and then I wanted to do an offset of it, I can actually come in and I can put an offset. So I can just say, hey, move this up, and I can identify how much that I move it up. So it offsets the exact opposite, or offset of the distance that you want. So if I want to compensate for kerf correction, or if I want to just make it offset a little bit around an object, I can increase or decrease that inset or my outset on it. And so I can come in here and say, make it smaller, make it larger. I can identify what amount of steps that it is. The new feature that was just added in the latest version is keeping the original shape, reconstructed, and keeping it the actual shape that it was. And on squares and circles, this is not an issue. But when it comes to stuff like I have here, let me undo that and go over here, delete my square. So if I were to take this is a traced graphic, and it's pixelated, it's got a very, very unique shape, and all these things have a very big weird shape. And so if I were to increase that without these new features turned on, to these two little buttons right here, let me show you what happens. So if I take this and then I say, let's make this bigger, you can see it starts distorting, because it's just expanding what was already there. It's not correcting or fixing anything. So if I wanted to make this slightly larger, it's now distorted, and it's not going to look correctly. They've put a correction in here to where it fixes that, because I want this nice smooth curve here that matches. And so that when I hit this button and I select this option and hit this button, it looks right. And so by turning on these new features, and so if I now select this and say, okay, keep it the original shape and reconstruct it if necessary, and click that, now it gives me a smooth, clean, consistent outline. It actually reshapes it and reforms that, and knows that I need to maintain that consistency on that. And so instead of getting a distorted shape, because all it's doing is expanding what was already there, it's reconstructing and fixing it. So that is it's not a huge new feature, but for those folks that have had to, say, run a quick trace on it, and then you want to do an offset, and then you get this strange skew or strange part, and you have to go in and actually fix individual nodes, you can now just click the little buttons in here and identify that you want to fix that and adjust the geometry. You can also correct the geometry in there. So minor little changes that are in this latest version. Is not a major update. It's a pretty minor update. The other one that I did want to show is too, they've made like a lot of new features and stuff over here to make it easier to work with small screens. For you folks out there that are working with maybe small iPads or screens, or you want to see it on your phone, it was very difficult to see some of these icons and stuff over here in the drop-down menus. They've made it a lot more user-friendly, more touch-friendly in that area. Another major kind of update that they've added recently is the print and cut capability. Within our material parameters, you can now set up a material specifically in the materials parameter for print and cut. So if I'm creating a material and I want to do print and cut on wood, I can now add an effect in here, and instead of just engraving cut, I can actually set one up for print and cut. And so I can just call this PNC and then hit OK, and then we can assign this one as just print and cut, and it assigns no power, no speed, but I know that this color is going to be for my camera registration for the color black. And then I can say, okay, my cut quality, or in this case, maybe I want to add a cut to it for cut, and we remove the other one. So now I have a print section. So little things like that they have improved in it. And it also, there's another feature in the print and cut where it allows you to kind of optimize it a little bit better. We can now do the print and cut capabilities with the array or feature. So if I'm out into the main area and I'm doing a print and cut in my field, actually that's not a print and cut. There's one. And say I want to array that, so I can now click it in here and say, hey, I want to fill my bed up because I have lots of sheets in here. The array feature now works with the print and cut as well. So you can just throw multiple pieces in there at a time, stack them together, and it's going to actively go find each one of those print and cut capabilities. So little improvements that have been recently added to that into the latest feature.
Well, and for those wondering, when Dave was showing about being able to add print to cut as a separate layer inside of your material settings, what that might be useful for, to come right back around to John's question, is profiles, right?
Profiles.
The ability to
Exactly.
set print to cut as a piece in profiles, so you no longer have to go individually set it for each individual job. But John does ask a good question here that it's one that I don't know off the top of my head. Use Ruby profiles all day. Best feature in the app. Thank you. We've been asking for the ability to sort or move up and down the various profiles. To my knowledge, I'm not sure that that's in there just yet. I don't think you're the only person to have asked, but I'm not sure if you can.
That is a good question. I don't use a lot of them, so I've never had to actually sort them. But for somebody doing a lot, that makes a lot of sense to be able to sort and control them. So this is a brand new machine, so I don't even have any profiles set up on my machine here. So, another one, just so you guys all know, we have our material shop now right in here too. So when you want to order materials right for it, that's a brand new feature that was just added. But yeah, for profiles, you are right. I don't believe we have the ability to actually like sort them. I mean, you can search for them in here once you have them. I don't have any, because like I say, it's a brand new machine. I haven't built any profiles for it. But the ability to actually like sort through them, if you've got, I would see that if you've got potentially hundreds of profiles and products for an API through a website, you may need to be able to actively go pick the right one without actually, I mean, you can search for it, but yeah, I don't think there's any sorting capability yet, but definitely something to look into from our team that's that's watching this.
That's what I was going to say, is you picked the right stream to mention it in. This is perfect. Even one of our colleagues, Tim, mentions in the chat that there might be something coming in the future we can neither confirm nor deny.
Good. They have been putting a ton of work into API. That is the future. The ability to drag and drop and just work with your website. Trotec has been putting tons of resources, and so many of our customers are now using that feature to be able to just completely automate the process from website to literally the operators putting the material in, looking at the screen and pushing start. So skipping the line type stuff has become, we put a lot of effort into it, and that is the future for sure.
Question for you from Dan here, Dave, and I'm going to call back to one of your, it makes me think about a particular hack video you did where you used a tray full of sand, where you did like a stepped object.
Question, Dan.
But he's asking
for sure. That is definitely a great question.
Different heights. Yes.
Yep. For sure. And that is a good question. And so when doing that, we're going to use color. So if I'm creating a profile specifically for a setting for a material within the materials database, I can actually identify that by color. So under materials, if I want say I'm etching oak and I have 3 different levels of, say, a spice rack or something, and it's made of oak. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to, let's just call it green. Let's say it's engrave. Let's add another one. Let's call this blue. You can name them anything you want. It's just a name. Maybe I'm going to name that color. So maybe I'll make the name blue, and I'm going to make it blue. And I'm going to make the green. I'm going to make it green. So
makes sense.
Yeah, at this point, I'm going to put in the same parameters for all of them. So say we're going to put in, we're etching oak. We know that I like 100% power and 60 speed on all of them. They're all exactly the same. The difference is my design will now have these 3 colors on them. So say I have 3 different levels of height that I want to put in. And so now I've got, and when I design my graphic, I do a spice rack and it's got black, text in black, in green, and in blue. They're all the same power and speed. The difference is under the advanced tab, I can now put a Z offset into each one of these. So I would measure the difference in this spice rack. So say the color black is at 0, and then the color blue is an offset at 0.5 inches or negative, depending on you need to go positive or negative. And then I'm going to save that. And then on the green, I'm going to say that is now an offset of 1 inch. And so that is the highest point, or it would be -1 inch. I hit -1.
Careful on that one.
Yeah. No, offset. Yeah, you do get tricky in this case, but yes, in essence, you can put in whatever the offset or the distance between each one of them. 0.75. Let's do 0.75. There you go. And so whatever you would measure the difference in those, say the spice rack or product or something like that, and you would put in a different offset for each one of these. Or you can manually focus onto the top and it'll give you the Z axis number, and you can type in those numbers and do it that way. But ultimately the offset. And you can do this 16 different times. We can do it up to 16 different colors. Here's all, if I click on the colors here, let me do it from here, but yeah,
if you click on
I unassign it, yeah, and then I can, here's all the different colors that I can choose. So we can do all these different colors, and each color can be a different operation. Not only can be a different operation for cut. I was doing a violin face once, and they wanted to cut the F holes in the violin before it was cut, and so we literally had to cut uphill. Well, how do you do that? So what I did is I broke the F into 6 different colors, and each color was a different Z height. So it would cut part of it, refocus, cut another part of it, refocus, cut another part of it. And so I, in essence, was able to kind of cut uphill, since there's no like LiDAR sensor that varies the Z as we move, which would be an awesome feature, by the way. But
sure.
Right. But using different colors for Z offsets operations, as well as power, speed, frequency, and stuff like that for different operations, can be used in many different ways. And so that's how we would compensate for different heights on a single product with one push of a button, up to 16 different changes.
So to answer your question really quickly, how do we cut uphill? The answer for most of us is we don't. Dave does. What I would ask is, can you quickly show where that Z height is displayed if you're focusing on something? Because I like the point you made where if you manually take the laser head and focus it to each step of your spice rack, say, you can see what the Z height is then to be able to calculate your Z offset. If I'm not mistaken, yes. Ruby should show you what that Z height is, right?
So, of course, our new convenient little buttons over here, it's kind of covered by a present here, but little buttons are placed. And so right now we have our axis control, and this is going to tell us where our X, Y, and Z is located. So our current X, Y, and Z, X is at 12.48, Y is at 1.36, but my Z is actually currently at 1.45. And if I move the Z down, if I went in the other room and moved my table down and manually focused onto another piece of material, it's going to tell me a new number. So I would take this minus that new number, and take the difference and put it into that color. So that's where we would get those settings at. And they've made it a lot more user-friendly on this latest version, to be more conveniently positioned. In the past, it was kind of down out here. So this is the latest version. Make sure you hit the little update button in the corner. This is a minor update, so there's not any major changes to it, but these few minor changes have made it a little more convenient in these locations to make it easier to find.
Yeah. So 2 quick questions then for you, and back to kind of what we were talking about a little bit earlier. Number 1, if you're doing multiple Z heights using different colors, is this another one of those situations where you might want to have an in-between color that pulls your head away from the object in between each step in order?
That's a great question. Yeah, so the biggest issue when you're playing with different focal heights is making sure that when it finishes that one, it doesn't make a correction and then move the head and then hit. So, I mean, in the case where I've had to do on one side, and then if the head moves across and it's going to hit something that's sticking up, you may want to do what's called a sacrifice color. So the other thing is the laser is going to do everything in order of color. So you can identify that order in the materials list. So I can identify it. And so if I have a material with multiple colors and I want to add additional effects to these materials, I can do them in order of color. And so if I'm doing lots of different colors, I can literally grab these and change the order to which it's going to process. And so by doing this, you can say, okay, engrave the black and then go to the blue, run it at 0% power and 100% speed, but it's only going to be an object that's maybe half of a second. So it's a teeny little circle. And so it's going to run down to a different location in the field, knowing the head's going to move. And then it's going to move to the third color next in the list and then move over and do that color. So sometimes you have to kind of do something, but just set it at 0 power. So it goes over and makes a quick little movement. In essence, all you're doing is telling the head to go to a different area and then move to the other area. So you're going around something that may be an obstacle.
Yes. The other thing I would say too is this is another one where correctly mapping your point that your head returns to at the end of your job is again going to be really important here, because you don't want it to be 2 steps down on the spice rack and then try and zoom back to 0, 0 and crash into the spice rack that you just finished engraving. So now yes, there it is again. Perfect.
Yes.
No, go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say that this is where that is. If anybody missed it before, make sure you identify, and you can customize it too, so it goes to a specific location, so it doesn't hit anything, or just at the end of the job, it doesn't go home and then hit it when it goes home, because that last Z axis or offset would potentially hit it as it goes home.
Yeah. If anything, what I learned from watching Dave's video is actually you're probably best to start with the lowest one first, and then so that your laser is above whatever the item is by the time you finish, so that even if you've forgotten or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's already cleared the top surface of your item, and you're safe to just have it zip back to wherever you need it to go to.
For sure.
Question for you here from Michaela, and I'm gonna rephrase it ever so slightly, Michaela. So if I don't get it, you tell me in chat, and I will correct my mistake. But asking if there's a best tabletop option when it comes to cutting 1/32 applique, and I would say to expand on that question a little bit, is there a best speedy laser for any X application, let's say, and then also, can you turn off air while cutting so it doesn't blow pieces everywhere? So that second question, absolutely, you can turn off the air assist, and we will show you how to do that in just a minute. But my assertion, really quickly, and I'd be curious to hear your feedback on this, Dave, but my assertion would be there is no best speedy or speed marker for any particular job.
What size you need to process. The quality comes from the smallest to our largest is going to give you the same possible output. Bigger ones will be faster, but when it comes to Trotec, we're top tier. We make equipment that is going to work, period. Your biggest limitation is just field size. If you got a larger applique, you're going to need a larger machine. That's really it.
Pretty much. Aside from that, you can feel very comfortable with regardless any speedy you get to. What I loved about the fact is you mentioned it's 1/32 applique, because the other potential benefit, let's say, of moving into at least a mid-size or larger speedy is your maximum power. Where like a speedy 100, your maximum power at the moment is going to be about 80 watts. Whereas as you get into 300, 360, 400s, you're getting up to the 120s, even a 200 at some, out of reaches. So if you need to be able to get through a thicker material, then certainly you might have to look at something a little bigger for that reason. But realistically, it's mostly just a question of bed size. The quality, as Dave said, is identical, across the board.
Yeah, for sure. Very consistent. Now, with exception, I'd say very high wattages, I wouldn't do it with. You get a 200 watt for applique, probably not your best solution. It'd be hard to control.
Yeah.
But that would be maybe the only exception. Most people buying a 200 watt are not doing applique. So the other question was, what was
air
the
assist
question? The air assist, yes. So under the material settings, again, we're into the material settings, and within each one of the material settings, we can control air assist. What we're using, how much we want. So do we want the air assist process off? So I can shut it off for that color. So if I am running red and I want it to be on, I can control the air assist for that color. It to be, say it's off on black, and then on my red itself, I want to make sure that is turned on. So you can control the air assist whether or not you're using it or not. So basically by the color you can control it. So when you run that job, it's going to say, hey, the color black, make sure you turn air off, and the color red, when you're cutting this material, make sure you turn it on. The other two is a lot of people don't realize, especially cutting some of those softer plastics and stuff. Sometimes you can split the difference instead and not use the small mouth nozzle, but use the wide mouth nozzle. It spreads your air down, kind of keeps any flare from happening, keeps your optics protected, but it doesn't blast that jet of air that can cause more residue and debris around your material, and kind of gives you the best of both. So switching the nozzle may be a solution for you, but if not, just shut the air off per color.
So I was 100% wrong. And I'm glad we got to have a good discussion about it regardless. But actually what Michaela was asking was which table to use. So if you were doing 1/32, would you use, the honeycomb table, the vacuum table? On an SP500 is specifically what she has, but would love to hear your thoughts kind of, across the range.
Yeah, I mean, you would need a cutting table because you're literally cutting the material. The honeycomb or the vector grid is going to be the ones I would use. I mean, if you're cutting lots of small parts, you can get a smaller honeycomb through us, or so the parts don't kind of fall down. There's really no wrong way. I mean, I do like, my favorite is the vector grid. It does two things. It produces the cutting ability. It's easy to take out if you need to clean the parts that maybe fall through. If you block off any extra area, it also creates a vacuum, and that vacuum keeps any warping or debris or anything from kind of forming if you got a lot of cutouts on the material. So standard vector grid is what I would use 100% of the time. And you can use the honeycomb as well if that's what you want, but the vector grid is going to be my go-to for my personal experience.
Yes, I would agree. I totally agree. And I think a good tip that we've mentioned before, but just one again to keep in mind, if you are using something like a vector grid in your machine, block off any of the space on the table that you're not using. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, a piece of cardboard that you tape down with masking tape, but the added suction that you'll get underneath your piece is so beneficial in terms of, like you say, avoiding bending, warping.
It also keeps the backside of your material cleaner because it's pulling away the debris faster. So your quality is going to go up as well.
See, that was one I didn't know.
Somebody asked me a good question the other day. They're like, I've been running in wood and plastic and leather on this for years, and I need to replace it. And I'm like, well, yeah, you can replace it. But another method I have told people, just use oven cleaner on it. Take the grid out, spray it with oven cleaner, let it soak for a while, and then hose it down. It takes that baked on grime, which is designed to kind of take off. So the foaming oven cleaner, spray on foam cleaner actually works well to kind of take a lot of that residue away from your cutting grid as it builds up over time.
I should specify too, John, that may be a misnomer on our part. We're talking about the aluminum cutting grid table. So the gridded table, but the one made from aluminum as opposed to the one made from acrylic.
Yes. Yeah. The acrylic one is a consumable one, and it is okay if you get a lot of reflection points on the backside of acrylic, and that becomes a big issue for like point of purchase, edge lit type signage and stuff like that. That's where I would use the acrylic cutting grid table. It is a consumable table, which means you're going to etch into it. And so it will need to be replaced over time, but it will eliminate any type of tick marks or reflection points on the backside for those rare applications like edge lit signs where the edges are going to be seen. You don't want to see any potential reflection points. But for most plastics, appliques, stuff like that, the vector grid is the way to go because you don't see that. There's no issue there.
Yeah. Well, and I would say too that, by and large, it's going to be very application dependent. The thing is, I always hesitate to tell people to do extra work before they start cutting, because one of the things I love about the laser is you can just toss something in, let's get it focused, let's get moving. But Dave does have some really great videos about how to reduce the amount of burning and flaming that you get on the underside of your piece using some of his laser hacks and stuff. So although they are a little bit of extra work in the beginning, they will give you a far nicer piece in the end. And I can say that from personal experience that it is worth
quality is everything to me. Make sure you run that few extra steps will make the difference between your product standing out for your competition too.
Yes.
So little techniques can make a difference. If there's no burn or char marks or inconsistencies and your quality is better, you can not only charge more, but you have higher perceived value and your customers are going to come back.
Yeah. And it can be as simple as just lifting the piece right off the table a little bit, little capital letter T's. That's what I always go to. Little T's that I cut out of stuff and just stick them in the grid and away we go.
There you go.
We are getting towards the top of the hour here, so I think I will probably call it there with everyone. My voice is definitely starting to fade out a little bit. I will say a big thank you again to everybody who joined us in the chat, and a thank you to our colleagues who were grabbing some of those questions in there. That's very, very appreciated, particularly since I should not be talking this much today going into the holidays, but I'll have some rest up time. Next time you see me, we'll be back at full form. So I believe this will be our last stream for the year, if I'm not mistaken. We will be back in early January. You'll see those announced on our YouTube page as usual, as well as in our emails. Our marketing team do a great job of sending out those emails. Want to give a big thanks to Dave as well. Thank you, as always, very much for joining me and showing up.
Thank you, Don.
100
too.
Speedy. Any final things you want to toss in there? Any happy holiday wishes, anything like that?
Oh yeah, happy holidays to everybody. I mean, I hope everybody has a wonderful end of the season. Take a break for a change, and
yes,
enjoy this final few weeks of the month and year. And we'll see you next January at our next live stream Ruby webinar.
Absolutely, couldn't have said it better. Thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in the new year. Happy holidays and take care. Happy New Year. All the best, everyone.
Bye, everyone.